The Tears of Gaia by Redback Spino. Chapter 9. The Sundrance of the Seven. Darrow's mighty wings threw up the clouds of dust as he began to descend into the massive crater on top of the first pillar. On his back, the 7 ponies held tight onto whatever they could as they buffeted out by the high winds. As he peeked one last time over the rim of the crater, Twilight noticed something strange about this breeze. First of all, it was remarkably warm and humid for such a height. Not cold and biting like the high mountain winds back in Equestria, but what was even more remarkable was how, by some mechanism of nature in this strange world, the wind came not from the sides, but constantly from the sky above them. "Tharos," Twilight called, "where exactly are we?" The dragon shrugged.
"As I said, we are the pillars surprising us. You may want to hold on. This may be a bumpy landing."
"But where is that? I mean, it's pretty obvious we're not. Whoa!" But before he could continue, he staggered backwards as Tharos suddenly touched down inside the crater. He glanced up at her.
"You mean this world?" "Honestly, little pony, I cannot say. I have never been here before. I'm just doing what the princess has told me to do."
"And what's that?" Twilight asked.
"They said that as soon as someone broke the spell they put upon me, I would take them for a flight south. And when the sun sets, I speak those words I used earlier, and which would take me to a different place. I guess that must be where we are now, this different place."
Twilight gazed upwards to the sky. From the deep, vivid blue to the strange purple spear floating high above them, there was no mistaking it. Perhaps it was some strange new world, or some alternate dimension, but wherever they were certainly not in Equestria anymore. The ponies disembarked on Tharos' back, and then more steadily than the others. Applejack in particular was eager to get her hose back on solid ground. "Masters, I've never been more happy to see old plain old ground in my entire life!" Applejack wobbled and stunned her way down to the dragon's arm, finally collapsing as he planted her first hoof on the crater floor. Rainbow Dash nonchalantly glanced around. "Ah, come on! It wasn't that bad!" The cow pony frowned at her. "Hey, I got no qualms with hats in general. The hot air balloon, your house, cloud sail, those are fun. But you know I'm no good with flying that fast. Remember the marble lady incident?" "Oh, yeah," Rainbow muttered, her ears suddenly drooping as the memory came back to her. "Though I kind of wish I did, to be honest." Rarity daintily jumped from the back of Tharos' hand onto the ground, adding, "Yes, I think that's an experience we all like to forget." Tharos listened to the conversation as he clambered down to join them. His curiosity piqued.
"What are they talking about? What happened?"
"Let's just say," Twilight replied, "that involved a flight spell, a pumpkin, and the fiercest flamingo you've ever seen." "And marmalade. Ooh," Vicky said with a shudder. "So much marmalade." The old unicorn paused a moment as he let the explanation sink in. After almost a full 10 seconds of silence, he looked at Tharos for some kind of enlightenment. The dragon only shrugged in response. Finally, the only response Tharos considered appropriate was a raised eyebrow and an uncertain, "Indeed." "Like Rarity said, kind of something we don't like to talk about," Rainbow hastily continued. "Anyways, it was a weird experience flying that fast, but not actually doing the flying myself. How did you find it, Fluttershy?" No answer. "Fluttershy?" "Hi, where is Fluttershy?" Thanos rolled his massive eyes and raised his tail off the ground, just high enough for every pony to see the practically petrified Pegasus who was hanging off of it, eyes wide as Dare's placed a vice grip on their dragon's tail. A bit of pressing and some soothing words later, Fluttershy had finally calmed down enough to muster the strength to speak. And what did she have to say? "Never again." Twilight suppressed a chuckle as he gave Fluttershy an encouraging hug. "It's all right, Fluttershy. It's almost over now. Tharos, where do we go from here?" Tharos pointed to a small archway in the side of the crater, though it was the stone causeway that led to the second pillar.
"Through that hole and across the bridge. The resting place of the Tears is inside the second pillar. I will wait for your return, little ponies."
"Come on then, girls! Let's go!" Vicky led the way eagerly through the arch, only to skid to a stop as he came to a narrow stone bridge. Peering over the edge, she immediately regretted when she saw just how high up she was. She glanced back with a nervous grin. "You can do it, Pinky!" Rainbow called. "Just don't look down!" Deftly, Pinky made her way out to the causeway, her eyes rooted firmly on the mountain top that stood over the other side. Behind her, she could hear the gentle clacking of her friend's hooves on the stone. For a brief moment, the usual spring in her step was gone, All of her focus was keeping on her hostess steady, keeping herself moving, and above all else, not looking down. Don't look down! Don't look down! She caught her hoof on a protruding piece of rock, stumbled and almost tripped, only catching herself as she teetered on the very edge of the bridge. But worst of all, she was looking down. It was as if time stood still for a few seconds. Neither Pinkie nor any pony else dared to move a muscle. Then, with a shriek that would waken the dead, Pinkie leapt nearly a meter into the air, before sprinting over to the stone bridge as fast as her little hose could carry her, until she slammed to the mountain on the other side. Desperately clinging to the stone wall for dear life, her chest rose and fell as she had just run a marathon. In the silence that followed, Fluttershy was the first to speak. Well, at least we know the bridge is stable now. A few minutes later, the 7 ponies stood, with great relief, at the edge of the top of the second pillar. Before them, dug into the mountainside, was the entrance to the pillar. Twilight gulped as he went to the doorway. The adrenaline rush for crossing that stone causeway had not worn off yet, and was still rising in anticipation and excitement. A cold sweat broke out on her brow, and her breath seemed to speed up. I bet right now you're wishing you had wings, didn't you, Twilight?
Twilight, is all well?
Starswirl asked from beside her. Huh? She failed to answer for a moment. Oh, sorry, yeah, I'm fine. It's just, I can't believe we're here. All this travel, everything we've been through, and we finally made it! Anxiously, she tapped her forehose on the ground as if some strange dance, grinning like a mad pony. Oh, I'm just so excited! Starswirl smiled, giving Twilight a gentle nudge towards the entrance.
Well, no time like the present, my dear Twilight. In you go.
She needed no second bidding. Twilight reared up triumphantly before trying through the entrance to the cave. Starswirl and the others right behind her. Now, when they went inside the mountain, one can assume that the 7 ponies assumed that they were well prepared for whatever waited them inside. They could have been prepared for a tunnel lined with all manner of booby traps, just waiting for some pony to step on the right stone. They may have been prepared for some monstrous guardian, be it a dragon or something older of valor, dressed up for the deep pieces of the world. However, not even Pinkie's most random and bizarre tangent could have prepared them for what they came skinning to a halt into. It was a large square room with a high ceiling and a floor of black and white tiles, arranged in a checkerboard pattern. It seemed almost like the kind of room one would find in the great hall of a rather small castle. Long green curtains covered the walls, and were illuminated by 4 tall brass lanterns which stood in the center corner of the room. At the very end of the room was a small wooden table with a tall box, carved from solid ebony, resting atop it with its lid open, and music seemed to be playing from some unseen gramophone, a gentle and quiet classical piece, more at home at a class dinner party than the inside of a cave. But while Pinkie, Rainbow, Applejack, and Fluttershy were given a moment to be awestruck by the bizarre sight, the 3 unicorns of the group were not so lucky. As if the pull of the world's gravity suddenly doubled for Rarity, Starswirl, and Twilight. Every step felt cumbersome and heavy, only growing worse and worse as they neared the table. What's happening? Rarity wheezed, crossing the floor. It feels like I'm trying to walk through molasses! Applejack looked down at the unicorn in confusion. What are y'all talking about? Twilight forced herself another laborious step. Can't you feel it? It's like there's 100 pounds weight on my back! No, not really. Y'all girls feel anything? The pair of pagans sighed and Pinkie shook their heads.
Oh, it must be the tears,
grunted Starswirl, only just managing to stay upright.
So much magical power contained in one place. Its aura must be incredible.
Only one way to find out, Twilight replied, channeling a horn. She fired up a spell that she had once learned on a whim, never expecting it to be useful. Being able to read the magical auras of creatures and artifacts was a peculiar, if not entirely practical, spell. But once she summoned the formula of the spell to her mind and cast it forth, honestly unsure what to expect. In an instant, the entire room was bathed in an endless spectrum of colors, every single creature and object glowing with a different colored aura. Every pony around her seemed to shimmer and glow around the edges, sometimes a bright turquoise, then dipping down to a deep green, brightening up again to a sunburst yellow before turning to turquoise. Twilight recognized these as colors of apprehension, fear, and excitement, respectively. Understandable considering what was going on at the time. But from the chest itself, there seemed to be emanating thousands and thousands of strings of light, in all shades of green, orange, to the brightest yellow, the strongest crimson red, to the deepest deep of blues. The rainbow of light seemed to get brighter and brighter as it neared the box itself, which itself was bathed in a brilliant, almost blinding white light. Dear sweet Celestia, if your ponies could see what I could see, Twilight whispered. Piggy reached down to hoist the unicorn mirror. Come on, Twilight! The tears are right there in that box! You have to get to be the lucky unicorn to open it up! Twilight shook her head. I don't think I can. I can barely stand!
Indeed, Starswell added, his legs feeling up. Perhaps it's contained magical power, or the sheer majesty of what it entails, or even some sort of final trap. But I doubt any among us who are unicorns will be able to even touch it.
The other four looked at their unicorn friends, then to each other. None among them seemed particularly willing to go near something of such power. Okie dokie dokie! I'll go get it then! Except for Pinky, of course. The pink mare bounced to the table, before casting a slightly nervous glance to the others. They urged her to continue, with their courtesy smiles and waving hooves. Taking in a deep breath, Pinky reared up and peered into the box. Inside was lined with black velvet, and a small depression in the center. A single, solitary jewel. It was a tiny emerald, about the same size as a walnut, cut perfectly symmetrical, dozens of facets glimmering in a glow of light. It was slightly pointed at one end, giving the vague appearance of a teardrop. Compared to the other jewels she had seen before, especially the ones of the size and quality Rarity would work with, it appeared to be particularly nothing special. Relatively small and simply carved and cut, and yet Pinky found that she could gaze upon the jewel with nothing short of absolute wonderment. It seemed to emanate an overflowing feeling of power, beauty, and majesty. It also gave her a slight feeling of sadness. Why? Why did such a beautiful jewel make her feel so sad? She turned around, her bouncy joy replaced by solemnity, to face her friends. Twilight had managed to stand back up and was leaning on Star Squirrel, who was barely keeping hooves on himself. Fireside was holding Rarity up by her withers. Every pony's apprehensive and anxious gazes stared back at her, turning to worry as they saw a single tear roll down the pink pony's chink. It's the prettiest thing I've ever seen, she said in a meek, delicate voice. Relieved and triumphant smiles lit up their faces. Twilight pulled Star Squirrel into a delighted hug, but another powerful pulse of pressure seemed to emanate from the box, nearly forcing her to the ground again. Pinky! Can you shut the box or something? She nodded and flipped the lid back into the carved wooden box. In an instant, the pressure vanished, and Rarity, Star Squirrel, and Twilight found they could stand upright again. Well, I guess that confirms my suspicions, the old stallion huffed as he stretched for a moment. Yeah, looks like we'll have to keep it in the box for now, or at least until we figure out some way to counter its aura, Twilight suggested. Applejack frowned. Wait a minute! So after all this time, after everything we've been through, we're not allowed to see the tears for ourselves? Not without making us magic users feel like a freight train is running off of us, Rarity replied. First I raised a hoof. Well, it seemed to only affect you three when you came into the same room as it. So maybe if you go inside, we can look at it ourselves. Starswirl clapped her on the back, nearly sending her face punting to the ground.
Brilliant idea. To be honest, I've had quite enough of mountain caves, no matter how well decorated they may be.
Yeah, I was about to say something, Redback said. It is kind of weird that you would just be in these gaslights and curtains and stuff in a cave way up in these mountains. Not to mention the music, as lovely as it may be, added Rarity. Where could it be coming from? It's baffling! Starswirl started for the cave entrance.
Well, there's something for us unicorns to discuss while you four have a look at our prize.
Twilight followed closely behind. Rarity followed at the rear. Don't take too long, the white unicorn called. Outside waved to Rarity as the three unicorns exited the cave, before turning the box onto the table. All right, let's have a gander at this thing. The four ponies nodded and huddled around the box. Reaching with a timid forehoof, Rarity undid the brass clasp on the box and flipped open the lid. Applejack's eyes grew wide with awe as he saw what lay inside. Well, was all she could muster herself to say. It's awesome. Rainbow gazed at the jewel with a glazed look of adoration that she would usually save for a wonderful air soul. Man, if Spike was here, he'd go nuts. So pretty, Rainbow whispered, and Fluttershy whispered, and yet so sad. Rainbow Dash silently agreed. She would never admit it out loud, but she was suddenly struck with a vague sense of despair and despondence as she looked at it. We did it, girls. We found the Tears of Gaia. Pinky trailed off, stretching out with her toward the tiny emerald. Close it. Huh? Close the box, Applejack repeated, Let's come on. Let's go meet the others. Pinky nodded, not really listening. She just reached further into the box, almost touching it. Shut it! Applejack's shout brought her back to reality, as he drew her foreleg back in an instant and slammed the lid shut. As the jewel was out of sight, every pony present felt a strange feeling of sadness dissipate and vanish. Huh. That was weird, muttered Rainbow. And you guys feel kind of sad when you looked at it? Oh, good! I was waiting to assess me, Pinky replied. First, I nodded, too. I felt it, too. I guess Twilight wasn't joking when she talked about the tears having great power. Pinkie Pie breathed a sigh of relief. That's magic for you. Come on, let's not keep the others waiting. With that, she picked up the box in her teeth and led the way out to where the unicorns were seated outside. Twilight got to her hose when she saw Pinkie with the box. Here, hold on a second, Twilight said, levitating the box out of Pinkie's jaw and began unclasping her saddlebag. This would be a bit easier. Were you okay with carrying it? Sure, as long as you're okay too. The unicorn nodded. Yeah, it's probably a good idea. It's not giving off that strange pressure anymore. But I'm still not sure how safe it could be if a unicorn carried it. So he gently eased the box into Pinkie's bag, careful to keep it as a tight fit as possible. It's kind of strange, though. I still can't get in my head that we found it. Rarity patiently tapped her hoof on the ground. Well, the sooner we get the tear safely back to Catalan, the sooner we can relax and let it sink in. Yeah. Come on, every pony. Let's head home, Twilight said with a smile, leaned away across the stone causeway. Oh, there's tempting fate. Then there's this. But no sooner has he taken the first step onto the bridge, when every pony collapsed to the ground as the sky above erupted with a sudden blast of that same muggy warm wind and a sound that nearly sounded the eardrums of all present. It started as some low rumbling sound, like thunderclouds in the distance, but then it built a crescendo into a roaring, throbbing sound straight out of the pits of Tartarus. It was like somebody had combined the worst elements of a blare of a trumpet, the creaking of a gigantic wooden door, the roar of some cyclopean monster, the throb of a subwoofer on full blast, and all in a single sound. It rattled the bones of every pony as it roared and blared, deep, impossibly loud, reverberating across the entire alien landscape. What in Equestria was that? Shrieked Rarity from behind, having to scream at the top of her lungs to be heard above the cacophonous roar from above. Applejack pulled her hat right around her ears. Well, nail it! And I thought the Timberwolves could roar loud! Whatever that is, it sounds big! Really, really big! Pinkie murmured. Like, bigger than a nurse and major big! Suddenly, Fluttershy shrieked, drew all eyes upon her. So you collapsed to the ground, eyes wide with horror, pupils no larger than a pinprick. With one quivering hoof, she pointed to the sky. What she was pointing at made every pony's collective blood run cold as ice. Hot above them, the massive purple moon was chasing. Across its equator, a thin dark line was forming, stretched from one side of the massive planet to the other, then began to expand. The crack seemed to slowly grow wider and wider, finally revealing a purple pale light beneath. The mountains still seemed to rumble and shake, only getting stronger and stronger as time passed. This sea of pale white seemed to glow larger and larger, glistening to the shining sky, until it formed a vague ovoid shape across the surface of the planet. Twilight watched in frozen horror as a new shape began to take form in the whiteness. From the top of the ovoid patch, an enormous black blot seemed to be descending into the sea of white. It ponderously made its way to the center of the white ovoid. There, it came to rest. For a moment, the rumbling stopped, and it was still. And then the planet blinked. And then the live readers proceeded to scream like a schoolgirl. Ah! Twilight felt her heart leap up to the throat. The massive black pupil contracted, then turned around towards the pillars below. Everybody run! Paying little heed to the ground shaking below them, and trying their best not to look up at the gargantuan, planet-sized eyeball that gazed down at them from the sky, the 7 ponies sprinted across the stone bridge, faster than they had ever sprinted before. There was that sound again, the monstrous cyclopean rumble, swelling into the ear-splitting roar that made their stomachs churn and their heads throb. The causeway shook and almost seemed to ripple, threatening to crumble at any second. Finally, they made it across the causeway to the first pillar, where Tharos was pacing anxiously back and forth. Twilight screamed his name, and he turned, his scaly face lighting up with relief as he recognized him.
There you are, little ponies. I was worried you might not make it back. Come! We must hurry!
He roared, lowering his tail so they could climb around to his back. Twilight made a mad scramble at the tail and onto his neck, where she clung into his neck muscles for dear life. Tharos! What the fuck is that thing? The dragon looked up at the sky in terror.
I have no idea. But let us leave here before we have to find out!
Once the other ponies had climbed up onto Tharos' back, he instantly took to the air, wings beating with such ferocity that anyone below him would have been blown right out of the crater into the ground far below.
Hold on, little ponies!
He shouted, taking to the sky with breakneck speed, desperate to get as far away from the pillars of Prasinus as possible, and out of sight of the gargantuan eye that slowed them down, and whatever it may belong to. Get us back to Equestria, Tharos. Now! She screamed, as he looked up to the sky in terror. The eye was no longer the only thing in the sky. Strange ripples seemed to be forming in the air above. Tharos put on an extra burst of speed.
We aren't going fast enough yet. Just a few more seconds!
The ripples seemed to give way and open, revealing enormous openings to nothing but agony blackness. But through the black voids, great spine tendrils, each the width of a mountain, began inching their way through, reaching toward the earth as the giant eyeball watched on, and the thing rumbled and roared again. Now, Tharos! Now! Twilight screamed, tears streaming from her eyes of pure terror and desperation. She slammed her eyes shut and held tight to Tharos, wishing for some kind of miracle to save them. The dragon clenched his eyes shut, praying silently he would be able to do it. Then he opened his mouth wide and began speaking the hallowed words again.
Now fall current akra verlofiken bex vamilad!
The sky lit up in a brilliant white flash again, and the roaring stopped. Twilight opened her eyes. Gone were the curved brown mountains and the yellow and green landscape. Gone were the deep blue sky, and the monstrous planet-sized eyeball, and the tendrils reaching out from the darkness. Instead, her eyes beheld the green crystal mountains in the foggy distance, and the rolling plains and the dense forests north of their Equestria. Up above them was the normal sky, darkened by the night, with Lunet's majestic white moon shouting down upon them. Twilight screamed again, but this time it was a triumphant scream of victory. We did it! We did it! Oh, Tharos, you magnificent dragon! We did it! She leaned down and actually kissed the dragon's scaly hide. Tharos looked back and smiled.
No thanks are necessary, little pony.
Soon Twilight was joined in her joy with everyone else. Starswirl threw his pointed head high into the sky with a whoop, before swiftly catching it again in the magical grass and putting it back on his head. Rainbow Dash took to the skies herself, performing lutes as she laughed. Applejack and Rarity cheered and laughed as well, half of joy and half of relief. Piggy Pie, however, was silent, as she held Fluttershy in a gentle, caring embrace. Neither the Earth Pony or Pegasus said a word. Both of them were just overcome with relief to speak.
Where to, little ponies?
Asked Tharos as he began his descent. Twilight broke out in a huge smile as it hit her. They had done it! They were really going home! To Canterlot, Tharos! Let's go home! The dragon laughed and did a quick about turn, roaring with victory as he sent a huge plume of crimson fire into the light of the sky. After about an hour's flight, the forest and empty plains below became dotted with dim yellow glow of tiny villages and settlements. Another hour, and the ponies could still see the dim shape of Canterlot Mountain in the distance. Hey, Tharos, Twilight asked, what do you think that was? That big thing in the sky?
I do not know, little pony. Honestly, I do not want to know. Tharos shuddered.
Twilight rested her chin on a scale. I've heard stories about things ponies have seen in far-off lands. The Ursa Major, great dragons, wyverns, and even other, larger things. The monstrous creatures that live under mountains with mouths that could swallow entire cities in one gulp. But that thing! No pony will ever believe it. She was cut off as Tharos suddenly veered to the left, near throwing his passengers and precious cargo into the air. A bolt of bright yellow air as he shot up past the dragon, just short of his left shoulder, veering to the air where it exploded high above them. Well, you know, I'm impressed. This was a short little adventure, but I'm kind of glad that we've done all this. This has been a fun little exciting ride. Live here? What? Look at the chapter count. 22 chapters. Why? This is chapter 9. Oh. Oh, yes. Ooh! Fireworks! Pinky exclaimed, finding her voice again at last. Tharos reared back a moment, coming to a halt as the sky as another, much larger blast of magical air whizzed past him, nearly slamming into his cheek. Rainbow peered into the darkness and could just make out tiny specks flying about in distance. I don't think those are fireworks! Everybody take cover! The ponies all ducked down in a storm of magical missiles and electric blasts suddenly streaked overhead, clipping spines every now and then, but mostly skimming above their heads.
Twilight! I can see them from here! Starswell bellowed. Some strange flying creatures! It looks to be Pegasi, or maybe Griffins, I'm not sure!
She peeked her head up to get a good look at the assailants. As she drew closer, she could make out the faint shapes of Pegasi or Griffins, but something seemed off about them. Many of them had much larger and bulkier tails that suggested more reptilian bodies. Some had leathery or skeletal wings. Several of the creatures even had spines. The bright yellow eyes confirmed her fears. It's those white guys again! How did they find us? Starswell replied.
They must have been following us somehow. We cannot let them get close to the Tears, or all is lost!
All the unicorns stood up and sent a simmering, crackling beam of energy blasting through the air at the creatures that attacked them on all sides. He fired at them again and again, missing several, but sometimes striking attackers in the side or the head, sitting and pointing downwards. Twilight stood up, firing her own magenta bolts into the night sky. Every pony, get to the middle and hide among Tharos' spines! Rarity, you stand in the back and try to drive off anything that try to get close. Starswell, you take to the left side, I'll take to the right. But what about the front? Rarity replied as he hurried into position. If in reply, the trio of monsters zoomed ahead on Tharos' face, their own horns and antlers glowing with magical energy. Dragon simply opened his massive mouth wide and sent forth a crimson fireball, which slanted the three attackers at full force, sending them, or rather, their immolated bodies, down into the darkness below. Rarity watched them fall with horrified fascination. Fair enough! So the three unicorns stood high, firing blasts and magical beams to the night, shooting anything that flew too close. They put up a strong fight, but the yellow creatures just kept coming on in waves.
It's no good! I cannot stop!
Tharos shouted, flitzing a shimmering green bolt slammed into his neck.
Ugh! Let's go past the mountain! Try to outfly them!
Can you manage that? Twilight cried, knocking another monster out of the sky as he feared too close. Tharos saw another fireball as attackers, clearing his path ahead.
I said to! Let's hold on and keep them away from me!
He put on an extra burst of speed, and every pony lurched forward a few steps before righting themselves. Rarity quickly conjured up a glimmering blue shield, lighting up to protect Tharos' body, throwing out to bash any of the creatures who got any ideas of getting too close. Magical missiles shattered against the shield and bounced harmlessly off. But still more blasts of yellow energies flew over the shield and clear over Tharos' head. Any pony who was looking up at the sky from down below would both be awestruck and confused as to why there seemed to be some sort of cross between a fireworks display and a dogfire going on in the air above them. Soon, the fight lulled to a halt, as the shadowy, yellow-eyed things fell back to simply tailing them, occasionally firing a warning shot at the dragon and his passengers. Rarity maintained a blue force field, aided by Twilight, who poured her own magic into the shield as well, tinting it a bright violet color. Every time Tharos tried to speed up or fly higher and escape, a hail of blasts would drive him back down, until he was forced to begin his descent. This was all that Magov and his cronies below needed.
Fire!
As Magov shrieked a command, about a dozen of his horned cohorts released the welling energy that had been coalesced in their horns, combining their magical energy into a nervous black fireball. This flaming plume was sent roaring into the air, straight at Tharos. The poor dragon never saw it coming. Time to seem to slow down, as 7 ponies were sent careening into the dark sky as Tharos was thrown back by the blast, which he took full into the chest. Twilight forced her eyes open as he was flung into the air. She saw the terror-stricken faces of her friends as they were flung into the air around her. Slowly, she stopped rising up in the sky. For a single moment frozen in time, she was motionless. Then, she began to fall. Her ears were filled with a wrangling sound, mingling with the muffled sounds of screaming from her friends. She was never going to see them again. This was it. This was... teleport. The single word shone out in her mind, like a strong word of command, blotting out all other thought. Turning full circle in the air, Twilight hastily glanced around at her 7 friends as they all fell around her. She made a mental note of exactly where each of them was in relation to her, concentrating on their positions. She then looked down at the ground below her, fast approaching, focused on a single spot far down below, a small, rocky outcrop in the middle of the forest. She channeled all her energy into the horn, faster than she had ever done before, letting it fill her, sending it out to surround her friends, embracing each one in a magical grip. Finally, the energy in her horn reached its full, and she cast. She then felt 3 wrenching feelings. Cracking open an eye for 1 second, she saw the shouting creatures flying among them, ripping Rainbow Dash, Fluttershy, and Applejack. screaming from her magical grip, was wrapped around and grabbed onto something else. Before she could do or anything, or say anything, her spell manifests, and there was a flash of magenta light. Then, everything turned to blackness. When Twilight opened her eyes, everything was a blurless, blackest green blaze, rippling and phasing before her. She blinked a few times, and the scene before her came into focus. She lay in her front, atop a small rocking copse, not in the middle of the pine forest she had focused on, but somewhere in the middle of a barren plain, at the foot of a great mountain range. Though her eyes were still blurry, and stars exploded in her vision from the battle earlier, she could make out the shapes of all the other ponies, all splayed out on the rocks as well. To her relief, she saw them slowly getting back up, with much groaning and moaning. Every pony okay? She said hoarsely. She received a murmur response. That was too close, she heard Ryder mutter. Soon, every pony had recovered from the irreverent teleportation spell, and all were standing up on wobbly legs. Hey, where's Rainbow, Flashlight, and Applejack? Asked Rarity, as she brushed her unkept mane from her face. Twilight felt as an icy claw only grabbed her gut. She looked around desperately, and her heart sank. Only 4. What happened to him? Where did he go? Pinky staggered her own corpse, looking around for any sign of the missing ponies. She saw dusty, dry badlands for miles all around her, but no sign of the 3. Behind her, she heard a low rumbling, and the gentle thud of some pony collapsing to the ground. She turned and saw Twilight, curled up and crying on her forelocks. It's all my fault. It's all my fault! Oh, darling, come here. Rarity hurried to her side. It's all right. It's not your fault. Yes, it is! I had them, Rarity! I was about to teleport us away, and I lost them! Twilight's words assaulted to more weeping. Those things, they grabbed him and pulled him out of my grip! Shh, it's okay. Rarity wrapped her arms around the weeping unicorn in a gentle, soothing embrace. If not just to calm Twilight's tears, to calm her down. For as the word of her friend's capture sunk into her mind, she felt a stream of tears dripping down her cheeks. Both ponies looked up to reddened eyes as they heard Starswell approach, his face a picture of uncertainty. I'm sorry about the others, was all he could think of to say. Twilight forced a smile as he looked up on his face, before yanking him down by the hem of his coat, now terror and disdain, and pulling him into her embrace. Old Stallion looked down at the 2 weeping mares clinging to him, before hesitantly pulling a foreleg around the other, and joining them into a comforting group hug. The 3 sat silently together, the forelegs around each other, weeping silently as everything that had happened began to sink in. Hey, what did Pinky go to? Asked Rarity, sniffing. Starswell released his grip and pointed. She's over there, with Tharos. Tharos? Twilight muttered. He made it too? Of course, her mind said. That must have been what her magic grabbed when the others pummeled it out. The others. She felt another fat tear roll down her cheek. Finally, Twilight and Rarity each took a deep breath and steadied themselves, releasing their grips on each other as Starswell got up. I suppose we better go see if she's all right. But when the 3 approached her, they found that she seemed to be anything but all right. She slumped down on the ground, sitting beside Tharos, who lay on his front before her. Her hair hung lank and straight around her shoulders, and tears dripped from her eyes. Pinkie Pie? Twilight nervously asked, the loss of her hair's usual plump and ominous side. Hey, Pinkie? The pink pony sniffed. He's been asking for you. Who? Tharos. She pointed to the dragon's head. Tharos lay with his eyes half closed, mouth hanging open. Twilight nervously patted Pinkie on the back reassuringly, before going over to Tharos. She could feel his warm, dry breath coming out in thin, ragged puffs from his empty mouth. Tharos? Are you okay? The dragon opened his massive yellow eyes and peered at her. His lips curled up into a weak smile.
There you are, little pony. No, I'm not okay. That blast of magic got me good.
He rolled it over slightly to display his chest, and the 4 ponies grimaced at the sight. His entire front was scorched and blackened, whole patches of scales missing. Right over his chest there was a massive gaping wound with the edges seared black, giving away the dark red muscles and tendons within. The wound was so deep that even if his ribs were visible, cracked and broken, with a burnt and black mess where his heart and left lung should have been. Rarity grasped at the horrific wound, then back to Tharos' face. It's alright, Thanos. It's alright. We'll get you fixed up in no time. You're going to be...
Don't you lie to me, little pony.
Thanos replied with a weak chuckle.
You're not very good at it.
He turned back to Twilight.
Dear little pony, how's the other one? The one who freed me?
Twilight closed her eyes and shook her head. We don't know. I think those things that attacked us have her and 2 others. Thanos' smile faded.
Oh, that's too bad. I was hoping I could take of one last time. I'd like to.
He half closed his eyes again, his breathing ragged and weak. Twilight and Rarity got up and placed their hose on his massive head, gently resting their heads against his. Starswirl and Pinky watched the whole scene with dry eyes.
To think I will live to see this day,
the old unicorn said, taking his hat off,
where ponies and dragons will be able to make peace with one another.
Pinky gave a half-hearted smile.
Equestria is a funny place these days, Mr. Starswirl. You could get up one day with something easy and nice planned, and by the end of the day you've been on an epic adventure seeing all kinds of cool stuff. And yes, I'm going to make friends with a dragon.
Without another word, Pinky joined her 2 friends and embraced the dying dragon.
At least we still got the Tears with us.
Pinky muttered, nuzzing her salad bag with her hind leg. Thanos nodded.
Well earned, I must say. I never had a chance to be with other creatures when I was going to Tears, you know. No chance to make friends. It's nice to know what friendship is.
The pony said nothing, only hugging the dragon tire. He smiled again.
Tell the little pony Fluttershy that I am eternally grateful for what she did. For what you all did.
Pinky nodded, mumbling.
We'll tell her.
Thank you, little pony.
It's Pinkie Pie.
She replied.
Pinkie Pie and my friends are Twilight Sparkle, Rarity, Starswirl.
She took a moment before continuing.
And the others who aren't here are Rainbow Dash, Applejack, and Fluttershy.
She buried her face in his scales again as a fresh wave of tears poured forth. I wonder if we'll ever see them again. Twilight mused aloud. Thanos had the strength. He would have held the ponies close to him as well.
You may yet, Twilight Sparkle. You may.
Finally, he could keep his eyes closed no longer, as he felt Vita leaving his body. A single solitary tear ran down his cheek, warm and silvery.
Thank you, Pinkie Pie, Twilight Sparkle, Rarity, and Starswirl. Thank your other friends when you find them. Those are nice names.
Just as the first rays of the early morning sun peeked over the horizon, Thanos' body went still, and he breathed his last. Darn you, Arthur! I liked him! I liked that guy! I really did! And you just would have killed him! Oh, if this wasn't a good book, I'd be... Ooh! And the worst part is, you audience members have to wait until next week to find out what happens next.